My parents always said, hey, when you were little, you spoke Chinese. And I was like, well, I don't remember that.
So I would consider Cantonese to be my first language, but in terms of proficiency, I wouldn't tell anyone it's my first language.
My mother tongue is a language called Te Jiu, and because there's only quite a small community in New Zealand that speaks it, you don't get the chance to practice it or use it very often.
A lot of my life, my family were taken away from me. So I was raised by a European lady. She kind of raised me on, I guess, New Zealand values.
So English is obviously the main language that I speak with my parents. Mum and Dad have spoken Cantonese to us our whole lives, but you lose a lot of that language when you start going to school because you're going to an English-speaking school and all your friends are English-speaking and it's not necessarily cool to be not English-speaking as such. I remember being at school and kind of doing my very best to be white because it was like the way to be cool, or like it seemed like the way to be cool. I remember rolling around with my friends and, you know, you're just having a good time. You're in primary school, you're playing Power Rangers, hitting each other before that game got banned. Got banned so fast. And nobody wants to be the yellow Power Ranger. Everybody wants to be the pink Power Ranger. She's white. Spoiler alert. I remember at one point really distinctly running kind of by one of the classrooms and they've got glass, you know, and you see your reflection in the glass when you're running by. And it occurs to you, you're not white. But you've almost convinced yourself that you are because you've basically immersed yourself into the entire culture so that you can fit in.
Yeah, I hated being Asian because I didn't feel like I quite fit in anywhere. Like, you had some Asian friends, but a lot of my friends were majority like European. And even like back in that time, all the movies were, you know, all the main cast, they were all European. And the only Asian people would be like Jackie Chan or Jet Li, and they'd just be martial artists. So I wanted to be the cool kid, you know, like everyone else.
When I was in high school, we went to China for the first time and we visited my mum's village, and I felt like I didn't really care about it as much as I should have. We had to use my mum as the translator for everything. So, like, you know, we never really went out unless we were with her because we didn't really understand what it was like to live in China and that kind of stuff. The only time I think we ever went out was when we went to McDonald's and we were trying to order chicken. Because we thought the word was gay for chicken, and they didn't really understand what we were trying to say.
Yeah, because it's real tonal.
Yeah, tonal, yeah. And then so we were standing there and we were like... And then it wasn't until this lady, like, realised that we didn't speak Chinese.
You were just weirdos.
Yeah. And then she took out this menu and she was like, you know, point to what you want.
In the beginning, I used to be, you know, I wanted to be so, I guess, westernized in terms of the way that I looked or the way that I talked. And then it's only when you get older you start to realise the importance that your culture plays into, like, who you are. One time I went to China, I was so ecstatic. I wanted to learn where I came from, my history, things like that. And it was sad because I had wanted to meet people that I've never met before, like family that you don't know. And the first thing that they'll say is like, oh, you know, you're so pretty, things like that. They want to welcome you. But when they realise that you can't speak anything, they're like, oh, no, I don't want to talk to you. So I think that's when I also felt really ostracised.
My dad always talks about how, like, we are kind of looked down upon by my grandparents, and it's like, we're okay with speaking English, but we didn't realise that it has a negative effect on him because we become the less favourable family. Our grandparents don't really want to do anything with us because we can't.
You guys can't speak the lingo. You guys can't communicate, and it makes it awkward when you guys have to go out or eat something or do something, you know?
Me and my mum never really kind of got along because a lot of times she would be angry with my dad and she would tell me something in Chinese and I would just be like, what? And so the only way for us to cope was to yell at each other. And it kind of came to a point when, like, it kind of got abusive as well. We had to get a social worker. He was Chinese, so he could speak with my mum. He would tell me what my mum would say, and then he would go back and tell my mum what I wanted to say. The one point that really hit me was like, he asked me, is there something else that you want to say to your mum? And I would be like, can you just tell her that I love her? And then he would tell her, but like, it's hard. And one thing I really wish that I could have done, like growing up, would be like, just, you know, when you finish school or something, or after school, you know, you want to tell your parents what you did during the day.
And I know my grandma's in a bad shape. I can't even find the vocab to say, are you okay? Or, you know, I just know I can translate some things. And it's harder when you go to the hospital and you have to look after her. You can't translate, oh, they want to do this to you.
I wonder if it's really hard, like living here and not knowing the language that everybody is speaking around you. So like you can't form very strong bonds with people because you don't have that dynamic of communication.
Me speaking to my parents, we would speak like a few Chinese words here and there, and to a point where we've created some words because, you know, they sound like a certain Chinese word, but but we've interpreted it a certain way or something like that. So so it becomes this
That's
like
interesting
mishmash of like language.
I think people on the street must find it really strange. I mean, it's also probably really common. Like when people see us on the street and I'm talking to my mum or something, my mum will be like full-blown speaking in Chinese and I'm speaking just conversationally back in English, and then she replies in Chinese and I'm speaking back in English. And we don't necessarily mix the languages together, but we're just speaking completely different languages, but we both understand both languages.
Even when I'm at home, when I'm speaking to my mum right now, I'll throw in Digio words that she'll understand and she'll do the same. So it'll be like, little jet boy, I'm hungry. So it's a mixture of English and common language.
The difficulty I have with Chinese is that it's so hard to express exactly what you mean because you don't have a level of vocabulary and comprehension as somebody that is like an actual native speaker.
I think our parents as well, they try to say things, and I think if I went to Chinese school and I learned properly and I didn't want to be like everybody else, then I think our relationship would have been better.
I guess it's interesting because I think back to when I was a kid and like I didn't want to learn Chinese, and I felt like I didn't really need it in my life.
You're kicking yourself now.
I'm kicking myself
Same.
now. So it's the Cantonese word for chicken, gay.
Gay.
Did I say it right? Gay.
Yeah, gay.